All right, everyone. The other day, a coup began in Sudan. It's not a bloodless coup either. You've got forces that are run by the actual government in Sudan, of course, which schismed some years ago. South Sudan is above the fray in this sense, and actually an included, almost a subcomponent of government, at least in the military sense, which has its own de facto leader and their former Janjaweed. Now, the Janjaweed were rebels that caused the crisis in Darfur years ago. This was from when I was in fucking high school. This is before the partitioning. And there were hundreds of thousands of people killed. They slaughtered enormous numbers of people. The Western world, despite being asked by the people and the government there, never got directly involved beyond setting up peacekeeping zones, and the UN had like refugee shelters and shit like that. Other than that, there was no real attempt made. We were too busy off butchering people in the Middle East to care about the country that was actually in need of our help and asked for it explicitly, and everyone supported the idea of helping them. So you had Save Darfur and all that stuff. That was the theme of the charity work that my senior class in high school did. We did a run or walk or whatever it was to save Darfur. We had t-shirts and stuff, and I still have mine, I think, in Rutland. I wonder if it still fits. Think so. I haven't really gained any weight since high school, so who knows. Anyway, some bad things are happening. First, the RSF, that's the former Janjaweed there with their own de facto leader, are claiming that they now hold the main government airport, their air base, as well as the presidential palace. Now, the government there is claiming that's not the case, but because of the fog of war effect, we're not 100% sure whether it's like Baghdad Bob and the government really is possibly going to fall to the Janjaweed, which would be a disaster scenario for some sensitive diplomacy both north and south of Sudan. We'll explain that separately. Or whether the Janjaweed are just, it's braggadocio and they're just raising hell for negotiation purposes. One problem, though, is that they do appear to have taken a bunch of Egyptian troops hostage, troops that were there at the behest of the government. Taking Egyptian troops hostage is not a great idea. You share a land border with Egypt. Their military is far larger and more sophisticated. It's actually, I think, ranked number 8 or number 9 in the entire world. They could probably overrun and capture Khartoum in a weekend, and that would be a big problem. They might not leave. It was our territory back several hundred years ago. Why don't we just establish Greater Egypt again? That sounds like a good idea. You're basically inviting that possibility. The Janjaweed probably would like it because then they can cast themselves off as internally displaced dissidents and they can go and butcher more people. You have also ongoing problems with Ethiopia to the south. Ethiopia also has, I think, probably a greater military capacity than Sudan has, especially post-partition. Ethiopia is also a close ally of Kenya. And Kenya, economically, by African standards, is doing fairly well. They do have tanks and shit. They run operations in association with the U.S. and with the Somali government against pirates on a regular basis. Did you know that? This whole area, the entire northeastern swath of Africa is kind of fascinating sociopolitically. You've got the influence of Arabic blood in there for quite some time. You have various intrigue there. The main problem with Ethiopia is that they're trying to build a dam on the Nile, and the Egyptians are not very happy about that. And they've been threatening repeatedly. This would give them a little bit of a stepping stone for possible further hostility. And there's not a whole lot the world's going to do. Egypt is fairly westernized. It's in a de facto alliance with numerous Western powers and can do what it wants. And I'm sure if they wanted to counterbalance the Chinese, kicking the pro-Chinese sentiment in that general region of Africa out would probably be a big victory. So careful who you take hostage over here in Khartoum. Dozens of people have been killed and many others injured. Various foreign services have told their citizens in Khartoum, stay indoors. You don't want to go outside right now. You don't necessarily know which group that dude with the gun is from, and he might be interested in holding you for ransom or something to prop up, the civil war that is risking breaking out here. I wouldn't be surprised to see foreign intervention of some sort if it doesn't calm down. And, of course, because of that fog of war, if nobody has established enough dominance within the capital itself so that they can show the world, hey, we are the ones that actually control the legislative building and the capital structures and everything, we can prove to you that yes, indeed, it's not a Baghdad Bob moment, says the government, or yes, we can prove to you that we overran it, say the Janjaweed, and fighting is ongoing, that indicates that there is actually a significant clash for power over who runs Sudan right now. Whether it's going to be the effective dictator of the government, the official recognized government, or a bunch of former rebels who have ties to terrorism in the literal sense, probably outnumber the government forces, to be honest, and considering the dysfunction there, may actually have the will of some of the population. Part of it's an ethnic struggle. So we'll see what happens, but it's impossible to tell at this particular moment. I just think that it's basically a world flashpoint. A lot of people don't even know this. They don't know anything about the Renaissance Dam planned along the Nile. That's to the south. They don't know anything about the socio-political connection between Egypt and Sudan. They don't even remember it partitioning. They think that South Sudan always existed. I have a map at home that does not depict this particular fairly newly minted nation, which has more arable land but less energy resources, if I remember correctly, than its northern, more Islamic actually counterpart. South Sudan leans more west. Interesting part of the world, again, which almost nobody, unless they're a geography nut or they study sociopolitics for their living like I do, they don't even, probably they couldn't find Sudan on a map. They'd be hard pressed to find Egypt on a map, or Morocco, or something like that. I think I can name and locate virtually all of the African nations. Used to be able to do it for every nation in the world. Of course, there are a couple more these days, so have to brush up into the, what is it called, the Jet Punk Countries quiz. That one's pretty fun. So let's hope it calms down. Number one, for the benefit of the civilians there. Number two, to prevent any possibility, again, the U.S., the French, I don't know, or the Germans at this point, the Chinese, somebody else might decide to get involved. Thus, you don't have just a coup, you have a war and an occupation, which nobody wants. Well, nobody reasonable wants such things. Secondly, it could spill over regionally. Egypt could get involved. They could launch a diplomatic complaint and say, look, if the government's not capable of making sure that our forces there are safe, we're not going to help prop you up, and we might fuck you in the ass as well, and we might restore order. And we've got thousands of tanks and manpower in the potential millions, and we can easily do that in a goddamn weekend. The Ethiopians, again, could get with their Kenyan allies and get involved as well, citing stability concerns or something like that. Well, we're afraid that border terrorism will spill across the border. We're afraid that it'll spill out into Eritrea and Ethiopia and Djibouti and all these nearby nations, and so we're marching in, maybe with the blue helmets in tow. Stranger things have happened. It's interesting that one of the main flashpoints in the entire world, most people don't even know that it's a flashpoint at all. They don't even know they couldn't find Sudan on a map. I find that sad. That's about all. Peace out.